This is ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the world. What do they do with inmates here? You'd be surprised. The inmates here are fitting: maniacs, terrorists, and America's most hardened criminals. I'll tell you about the conditions under which people sentenced to multiple life terms are rehabilitated, and why even psychopaths fear this prison. Let's go step by step. Why was such a harsh prison needed in the first place? The origins of ADX Florence date back to 1983, when there was a brutal attack by inmates on staff at the federal prison in Marion, Illinois. Despite high security measures, the prison could not prevent the riot, resulting in casualties. Interestingly, Marion Prison was built to replace Alcatraz, which was also considered very strict. It became clear that regular prisons couldn't handle inmates who had nothing to lose due to their life sentences. Alcatraz was surrounded by cold waters to prevent escapes. However, in 1962, 3 inmates successfully escaped, leading to the prison's closure in 1963. Most Alcatraz inmates were transferred to Marion, where more severe conditions began to be tested. These included solitary confinement and near-total isolation of inmates to prevent conspiracies and attacks on guards. As you can see, this didn't help. In 1983, 2 members of a local gang killed 2 guards within hours. This triggered the creation of prisons with even higher security levels, introducing the term supermax security, surpassing the previous maximum security. Marion became the first prison of this class, but upgrading old buildings to new standards proved impractical. Therefore, it was decided to build a new prison, costing several $1 billion. Thus, in 1994, ADX Florence was created, a place designed to break anyone. To understand for whom these harsh conditions are intended, let's meet some of the local stars. As mentioned, here are terrorists, serial killers, maniacs, and traitors, all serving multiple life sentences in America. The record for the most life sentences is held by Terry Nichols, Timothy McVeigh's accomplice in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, which killed 168 people and injured 680. Imagine that. Nichols was sentenced to 161 life terms without the possibility of parole. Or Abu Hamza al-Masri, a close associate of Osama bin Laden, who became a symbol of the early 2000s terrorist threat. Convicted of organizing kidnappings and attempting to establish a terrorist training camp in the US, Abu Hamza lost both hands and one eye while mishandling explosives, earning him the nickname Captain Hook. At ADX Florence, his prosthetics were replaced with a safer tool combining a spoon and a fork to minimize risks to others and himself. And of course, Ted Kaczynski, known as the Unabomber, who became one of the darkest figures in American criminal history. From 1978 to 1995, Kaczynski conducted a terrorist campaign by sending homemade bombs through the mail, killing 3 and injuring 23 people. His extensive notes and manifesto, published at Kaczynski's demand by leading newspapers, enabled federal agents, including James Fitzgerald, to identify and arrest him. They even made a series about it on Netflix. But what is it like to be inside this place? The architecture and security systems of ADX Florence are designed to minimize any chance of escape or criminal activity within its walls. It is simply impossible to get in. No contractors, public figures, family members, or other outsiders. Only criminals by sentence and guards. The only exception was in 2007 when a group of journalists managed to organize a 2-hour tour of the prison. Their impressions were overwhelming. Inside the building, there was a deathly silence. The security level was so high that even the smallest mouse couldn't go unnoticed. Cameras and motion sensors were everywhere, and a high barbed wire fence surrounded the building. The cells were built so that their walls did not transmit any sound. This takes a heavy psychological toll. I'll tell you more about what happens to inmates after years of such silence. It seems that every aspect of the cells at ADX Florence is meticulously designed. There is a strictness and precision to it. Inmates live in conditions where even the thought of self-harm seems impossible. The cell is arranged to minimize risks. Almost everything in this small room is made of concrete. The bed, which is essentially a podium with rounded edges, the table, and the chair, all without sharp corners. The sink has no traditional protruding faucet, and the toilet has a system that blocks if an overflow is attempted to prevent flooding. Even the shower is equipped with a timer that controls the water flow. And the window? It exists, but not for the view. Measuring only 4 by 48 inches, it is positioned so inmates cannot use it to orient themselves. It is more like a slit than a window, offering only a hint of the outside world. It's a real concrete kennel where there's hardly room to move, and escape is out of the question. An interesting point. With good behavior, inmates can earn certain privileges. These include access to literature, a radio, and even a television. However, the broadcasts are strictly educational or religious. This is a small but significant concession for those who spend 23 out of 24 hours a day in complete isolation, interacting only with the staff member who brings their food without exchanging a single word. This order underscores the seriousness and efficiency of ADX Florence's security system, designed not only to contain but to fully control the most dangerous inmates. When it comes to the daily life of ADX Florence inmates, it's worth looking more closely at their routine, which is practically non-existent. You exist in a perpetual vacuum. 1 hour of interaction per day is all an inmate can get. Even then, they can only call their lawyer or close relatives. An important point: if an inmate chooses to use the time for a phone call, they must forfeit their exercise time. And the exercise here is nothing like you might expect. The exercise area resembles more of an empty pool, a narrow space open to the sky, where inmates can only see the sky above. This design helps prevent inmates from orienting themselves. Walk 10 steps and you're at the edge, 31 steps and you've circled it. For those who don't want to talk or exercise, there are alternatives: physical exercises or the chapel. At ADX Florence, it seems the safety of inmates is paramount. The food is also special. All meals are served as purees or mush to eliminate the risk of self-harm. However, most of the time, 23 hours a day, inmates spend in complete isolation in their cells. This situation undoubtedly has a strong psychological impact on them. The lack of sounds, interaction, and activities makes every day in ADX Florence a test of endurance. In such conditions, existence is more like survival, where each day is a battle with one's thoughts and loneliness. There is no intention of rehabilitating and reforming these people, and it's clear they are not in there for DUI or insurance fraud, although such fraudsters are quite common in America. But what should an ordinary person do if they get into an accident in the USA? Where to seek help? How to find a competent lawyer? How to get compensation if you don't have insurance? The company DTP America helped clients receive $21 million in compensation. They will definitely answer all your questions. Link in the description. As you understand, ADX Florence is the pinnacle of maximum security systems, and restrictions here are at the highest level. Currently, there are 335 inmates, although its capacity is 490. This is the place where the most aggressive inmates from other facilities are transferred, and they have the greatest chance of improving their conditions through good behavior. If someone is initially sentenced to ADX, they will not be transferred anywhere else. One of the most impressive features of ADX Florence is its security system. The monitoring center has a panic button that, when pressed, simultaneously locks 1,400 steel doors. This action ensures immediate isolation and control over all processes inside the building. Staff continuously monitor the premises through a video surveillance system. Security is also enhanced by patrol dogs and an armed convoy that tirelessly guards the perimeter. Each guard goes through multiple searches to ensure they don't even think about bringing anything prohibited into the perimeter. These measures are so effective that no inmate has ever attempted to escape from ADX Florence. With such a level of protection, any attempt to escape seems utterly futile. But can this place really reform anyone? ADX Florence, theoretically created to make criminals reflect on their actions and possibly even reform, reveals serious problems in practice. Solitary confinement, intended as a means for inmates to reassess their life values, often has the opposite effect, worsening their mental health. Isolation, especially prolonged, has a devastating impact on a person's psyche. Scientists emphasize that just a few hours of complete isolation can start to affect anyone's mental state. And at ADX Florence, people are in such conditions for years, sometimes decades. Some opinions suggest that such long-term solitary confinement is akin to conducting experiments on humans. The examples of individual inmates speak for themselves. The New York Times reported on Jack Powers, who was transferred to ADX Florence after an escape attempt from another prison. Isolation drove him to such a state that he inflicted serious physical harm on himself, including self-mutilation of his ears and finger, and attempted to inject infected fluid into his brain. Travis Dusenberry, another inmate, shared with the Marshall Project the claustrophobia he felt inside his cell, despite not having suffered from it previously. Travis, who spent 10 years in ADX Florence after attacking a guard, was helped by the thought of any changes in his surroundings, even winter visible through the narrow window of his cell. These examples show that while ADX Florence is intended to contain the most dangerous criminals, the conditions they live in may not only fail to help their reform, but also exacerbate their psychological issues, making their potential return to society more problematic. As I mentioned, ADX Florence, with its multi-tiered security system, allows some inmates to move from stricter regimes to more lenient ones, and sometimes even to other prisons. However, such transfers are not available for particularly dangerous criminals, including terrorists and those who threaten U.S. national security. But even if inmates leave solitary confinement, the consequences of prolonged isolation can accompany them for life. In 1993, Dr. Stuart Gracian described solitary confinement syndrome, which includes paranoia, panic attacks, aggression, and psychotic symptoms that can stay with inmates for life. This syndrome raises questions about the fairness of long-term solitary confinement, especially in light of the Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Despite numerous lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of long-term solitary confinement, U.S. courts have yet to find any violations in these practices. Nonetheless, the international legal community, including the United Nations, exerts pressure to end the practice of long-term solitary confinement based on the Mandela rules, which equate such punishment to outright torture. It's worth noting that some progress has been made in protecting inmates' rights at ADX Florence. In 2016, the U.S. Bureau of Prisons settled a class action lawsuit involving 100 mentally ill inmates, ensuring the transfer of the most severely ill to specialized medical facilities where they began receiving necessary psychiatric care. Those deemed mentally healthy continue to serve their sentences in solitary confinement. These changes, though small, are steps toward improving conditions and respecting human rights in such challenging environments as ADX Florence. But while I'm talking about this perfect and most secure prison in the world, it has its own skeletons in the closet. Although ADX Florence predominantly enforces solitary confinement regimes, there are conditions for group confinement for certain inmates, after thorough checks and risk assessments. But even in such strictly controlled conditions, extraordinary events can occur. One such incident happened on April 21, 2005, when members of a Mexican gang murdered another inmate. The violence was so brutal that even a nurse familiar with all the criminals in the prison couldn't recognize the victim. Medical staff trying to determine if the man was still alive were powerless as the victim's face was so disfigured that even the location of his eyes was indiscernible. Fortunately, this incident remains the only one in ADX Florence's history. This event underscores the seriousness and complexity of maintaining security even in such highly protected facilities as ADX Florence, despite incredibly stringent security measures and control. In any case, one incident in several decades is an excellent indicator that the concept of ADX Florence works well. And regarding the torture of isolation, what do you think? Is it fair? Write in the comments, I'd be happy to discuss it with you, and thank you for watching.